Welcome to Peace, Love, and Pollinators, the podcast that's anything but your typical gardening show. We're here to transform how you see your backyard, balcony, or local park by uncovering the powerful connections between you, your plants, and the planet. From pollinator-friendly gardening hacks to creating green spaces that fight climate change, we explore more than just what to plant. We dig into why it matters. You are listening to Peace, Love, and Pollinators. All right, welcome to Peace, Love, and Pollinators. I am so excited to introduce today's guest, Dan Kittredge. He is a longtime friend and one of my top soil mentors. So we are going to have an excellent conversation today about soil, about crops and food, farming practices, and how we can save ourselves and save the planet. I would like to welcome Dan Kittredge. I am so excited to have you on. It has been, since the conception of Peace, Love, and Pollinators, a kind of a goal of mine to pin you down long enough to get you here. So welcome, Dan. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me on, Trevor. Great to be on.
Totally excited for this one. So we're just going to, for those who don't know you, you grew up working with your parents on Many Hands Farm, which was an organic farm. So then what, in your experience as a childhood, normally I ask people what got you into working with nature as a profession, but in your experience and childhood in farming, et cetera, and working with organics, what led you to start, the Real Food Campaign, which then became the Bionutrient Association? How did that all connect? I mean, it's just it's one thing to farm, but how did you get to where you are traveling the world speaking about food and human health?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's been a journey. Like you said, I did grow up on an organic farm back in the 80s. So that was actually before even organic was a word, and my parents ran an organization called NOFA, Northeast Organic Farming Association, and helped write some of the first organic standards in the U.S. 40 years ago. So, the lifestyle's great. The homesteader, don't answer to anybody. You're in nature, and so when I got married and wanted to start my own family, I thought I would try to do the same thing, raise my family on the land. And I thought my farming would be my income as opposed to my parents who got their income from running the organization. So it was when I realized that I wasn't a good enough farmer to make a living because I had things like pest pressure and disease pressure that were causing me to not be able to produce enough crops to succeed, that I started looking more deeply into how do you, if organic's supposed to be better, then shouldn't your plants be healthy? And being eaten alive by insects and disease is not a sign of health. So, I started researching. I started going to conferences, reading books, attending seminars, practicing, shifting practices, like staying within organic, but just sort of adding pieces of the puzzle that I hadn't been taught about. And when it, within 2 years, when my cost of production basically went way down, my pest and disease pressure was gone. All of a sudden I was making a living, farming, working 20 hours a week. That's when I started doing this education work. I'm this is really, I've been in farming for my entire life, and I've never seen anybody make a living working part-time farming. And so I felt obliged to start talking about it. And
it's usually a lifetime commitment, and you still don't make a living. So the fact that you're able to make a living part-time farming is pretty incredible.
Yeah, that's why I felt obliged to start talking about it, because I know a lot of farmers who struggle with making a living, and I think the more I understand, it's because in most cases we aren't working with nature. We're working against nature. We're doing things that are counter to nature, and that's why our plants are struggling. I can go into it in much depth. I'm not sure how much time we have.
No, that's absolutely all right, because one of the first terms I heard from you, as I mentioned in the intro, you were definitely one of my first and one of my top soil mentors. One of the terms I learned from you was nutrient density. So it's just like, what is nutrient density? What analyses within nutrient density matter? How does that matter to, this is kind of like a two-part question. So what is nutrient density? And then what about that is connected to human, the human health outcome and, planetary health as well?
Yeah. Well, nutrient density is a term that I basically
Coined.
create almost 20 years ago now. And in the presence of a lot of these people that I was learning from, when they were explaining to me the fact that, plant health connects to nutritional value, connects to flavor, connects to soil health, connects to pest and disease resistance, connects to farm viability. And I was like, so what you're saying basically is that the nutritional level of the food varies dramatically, and that connects to all the rest of these things? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, that's amazing. What's the word for that? And they're like, we don't have one yet. And so I was like, well, do you mind if I work on that? And so, basically when I'm explaining to people, I say, have you ever had a tomato from the garden in August that was picked ripe? We'll say, yeah. I say, have you ever had a tomato from the grocery store in January? People say, yeah. I say, you as an animal, are wired with sophisticated nutrient monitoring systems called noses and tongues, which help you understand what is and what is not good for you. And that variation in flavor that you experience in those two tomatoes is a profound nutritional variation. And we are wired with that capacity to discern, and it connects to carbon sequestration, ecosystem function, farm viability, soil health, pest and disease resistance, flavor, aroma, human health. And so that is effectively what I've been working on now for almost 20 years, is this concept that, that variation exists. And if we could begin to build standards and measurement instruments to test that, and we could support people in choosing what's better for themselves and their families and leaving on the shelf what's worse, we could use the economic system to inspire, I think, a profound shift in the way agriculture is done that could actually reverse climate change and a lot of chronic disease.
I totally agree.
People could actually just choose of the food on the shelf the stuff that's better and leave on the shelf the stuff that's worse, because there is variation.
There's total variation, but I think where we even need to start is, people will have a tomato in August from their garden and taste that difference, and they'll have a tomato in January, and yes, they can sense it. I don't think they're really realizing that they sense it. I think they sense, okay, a garden-grown tomato, fresh-picked tomato is one thing. People aren't, realizing what they're sensing is a lack of nutrient density, a lack of nutrients in that vegetable. They're just thinking, oh, well, it's packaged, it's here, it's a grocery store, it's whatever. They're not realizing it's their wired biological system telling them that this isn't really that good and that good for you.
Well, it's obviously better for them than a processed product. So let's be clear.
Absolutely.
Whole foods and things are better than processed things. The more processed it becomes, the less food it is.
Yes.
But there is very dramatic variation. And I like to tell people, the reason your kids don't like their fruits and vegetables is because they're not very, in relation to what they could be, not very nutritious. If you've had a peach that was picked right off a tree, that's an amazing experience. That's not usually what you get from the grocery store peach. But yeah, that's the central point, is that nutrient variation exists, and it's massive. And not all carrots you're looking at are uniform. And what we're doing is helping to, create a scale to define quality, 1 to 100, and then support the process of instruments being built that people can have in their hands and you can go and test. So you don't need to trust any certifications or labels or marketing. You actually have a scientific instrument in your hand that you can go boop, boop, 20 out of 100, boop, boop, 80 out of 100.
Yeah, totally. I'm very excited about that, and I certainly want to get into it. Can you just expound a little bit more just on what that nutrient density is doing to our human health? Because I feel like people are like, well, I'm eating my vegetables, not realizing those vegetables aren't necessarily maybe doing what they should. They don't have the polyphenols, the micronutrients, amino acids, whatever it might be. And it's not just vegetables. I mean, it's meat products
Grains,
as well. It's
dairy, rice.
it's all there. So can you just expound like a little bit more how the health of our soil, the health of the plant and or vegetable or animal, is contributing to the current, health of our communities around the world?
Yeah, well, so I mean, one of the things we started doing with our research 8 years ago was just to try to assess the scale of variation of nutrient levels in food. And so we started a project. We got, over 5 years, 10,000 samples of crop from 2 continents, multiple labs, like 25 different crops. Like, we've surveyed the supply chain. We said, send in to us from off the shelf your carrots and your blueberries and your apples and your potatoes and your wheat and your oats, and let's look at them. Let's see what's in those, like, in a spectrum of food from the supply chain. Mm-hmm. And it was like 5 to 1 on this nutrient, 10 to 1 on that nutrient. Like, this carrot has 5 times as much sulfur or 10 times as much phosphorus as that carrot, 20 times as many polyphenols, 40 times as many antioxidants. Like, the variation between this carrot and that carrot is a big amount of nutrients. And those nutrients are things that our bodies need to function. And when year after year, decade after decade, generation after generation, because of the way farming is done, the nutrient levels are decreasing in our food, that means we're beginning to fall apart. And like, generation by generation, we're getting weaker and weaker because our food actually does not have in it what our bodies need to function well. And so, yeah, it's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
I remember you gave an example in one of the classes that I took with you. You had fresh picked spinach that day, and you had bagged spinach, and we did kind of a nutrient test, using the bricks on it, and just figured out like, oh, this has been sitting in the bag for however many weeks on the shelf. This I just picked this morning. Look at the difference in just these two. And again, like you said, all whole foods, all vegetables or whichever, are great to go, but there is certainly a difference when you care about the nutrient density, and also there's a difference between fresh picked and what's been sitting on the shelves.
Well, but just because something's fresh doesn't mean it's better. I mean, what seems to be the real thing that connects is the health of the soil. So you can have a local farmer, pick this morning, selling into your farmer's market. You go to the farmer's market, you're like, oh, I got the best stuff available. That's not what our data tells us. Like, we got a lot of people sending in stuff from their farmers markets, and like, it did not show better than other stuff. Organic did not show better, right? I mean, like, what seemed to show better was health of the soil life. Like, basically, nature's function is what connects to the quality of the food. And
you just totally set up my next question.
It's a big deal.
It is people just assume, organic is going to be the best, and it's just because something's labeled organic. But another term you introduced to me was beyond organic. So yes, I guess we can say organic is better because synthetic fertilizers are not used to grow that vegetable, but yet fertilizers are still used. They can still come from nutrient depleted soils. So can you kind of explain organic and dispel the myth that organic is automatically the best? And can you talk about what beyond organic is?
Yeah. So, like I said, my parents were leaders in the organic movement. They ran an organization educating about organic, running conferences. They helped write some of the first organic certification standards in the United States in the 1980s. So I'm, a child of the organic movement. I should be like telling you organic is better. I also happen to go to like university and learn about the principles of science and like, you know, I like to use the example of religion. I'm a Methodist. We're better than you Catholics, and we're definitely better than you Muslims or whatever. Like I'm organic. We're better than you conventional farmers, or we're better than you local farmers. Like there's all these sort of assumed superiority in the food movement, which I think is like in many parts of human culture. And so our thought at the Bionutrient Food Association is it's the nutritional caliber of the food that matters, not what your certification label is. And so, yeah, if you look at the way that most of the food that's grown in this country that's sold as organic is grown, it's grown in a very industrial model, lots of fertilizer, lots of things that kill insects and kill fungi that are certified or approved for organic certified use. It's the chemistry paradigm. We call it the organic substitution method. So you take your requirements for fertilizer and you find an organically approvable version.
Yep.
You take your requirements for insecticide and you find an organically approvable version. You take your requirements for fungicide and you find an organically approvable version. That's not optimizing soil health and optimizing nutrient levels. That's an industrial chemistry paradigm, applied under an organic protocol. And that is the reality of the way organic has grown. So are those insecticides and fungicides from organic as detrimental to your body as the ones that are from the non-organic system? No. If I could choose, I'd prefer the ones that are from the organic system. But the point is, it's not what we're trying to say is like, it's great to identify what's bad and wrong and like say we don't want what's wrong. What we're saying is how about we identify what's good and better and support people in finding that.
Yep.
And I think in many cases the organic is like less bad, but not necessarily more better. It's not more nutritious. That's what the data tells us.
And it's kind of playing semantics because it's the same practices on both sides of the fence. One, yes, okay, organic ultimately overall I guess would be better for you, but it does not mean that the food is more nutrient dense or healthier for you.
That's the basic point.
Than a conventionally grown vegetable or whatever it might be, which then leads me into regenerative farming. But there's also a lot of other semantics because there is pasture raised and pasture finished, and there's all these terms that you now see on these labels, and cage free, meaning there's just a little teeny tiny door, and it's just like it's like you can just kind of skirt around using these words. And what I really admire about what you're doing, and we're going to get into, is that you're really you're saying, okay, let's not play with words. Let's deal with facts. Let's deal with science. Let's deal with reality, and let's address what really is good for you, rather than just putting a picture of a pasture on a package of butter and calling it delicious or healthy for you.
Yeah, I mean that's the opportunity, is to actually do a better job. And foundational to this whole thing, which is what got me into it again, was I was making my living farming working part-time. The reality is when you work with nature, your cost of production goes down. So it is more economically advantageous to do that. And it doesn't have to cost more. It's actually better business once you figure it out. And so there's a real opportunity here to support a complete system transformation by using the economic structure of like supply and demand. Yeah, I don't know how to. It's
Well,
extremely exciting. It's extremely exciting.
one of the quotes that I use from you oftentimes in my presentations is plants don't have the ability to digest soil. So what you're essentially saying is you can be a part-time farmer because you've focused on the soil. Can you just elaborate a little bit on soil health is connected to plant health, is connected to the reduction of disease pressure and pest pressure? Just to explain that, because that I have found in the landscape community is a lateral move. Once I started focusing on the soil, my landscapes that I created, the disease and pest pressure went down, et cetera, once I started focusing on the soil. So what is it about the soil that makes food better, that makes plants better? And what is it about our practices that kind of usurps that or interrupts that?
So,
Tough. It's kind of a weird question, I understand, but
no, it's all good. It's great. Great question. I mean, the scientists tell us that sometime around 420 million years ago, plants evolved on land. Prior to that, there were no plants. They didn't. The continents were not covered with plants. And actually, what happened was it was the microbes who evolved the plants to feed them, so that they could digest the soil and establish an ecosystem for them to reproduce. So I like to tell people, if the animals are like the top of the food chain and the plants are the middle of the food chain, the microbes are the bottom of the food chain. And when I'm teaching a course, I say, I don't care if you're growing cucumbers or apples or a lawn or whatever, rutabagas. What I care about is the function of life in the soil. Like how many, how diverse, how well are they functioning? And what seems to be the case is that when you can manage an environment to optimize the level of life in the soil, the function of the microbiome, plants flourish. And so a lot of the things that we've been taught to do by people who are selling us stuff as part of what we call agriculture directly disrupts that, right? The application of fertilizer, the application of insecticides and fungicides, tilling the soil, leaving it bare over the winter. There's a million things that we do that are systemically detrimental to that function of life at the bottom of the food chain. And so once you understand that the plants were evolved by the microbes and that plants are only fed well by the microbes, then you shift your management to create a reality where the microbes flourish, it gets so easy. It gets so easy. It gets dramatically less expensive. Everybody's better doing more well, except for the people selling you stuff. Right.
So we usurped that relationship. Sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry. I was just saying we usurped that relationship by moving to fertilizer and just kind of feeding the plants, directly. We interrupted that community, and it seems like everything from a one-celled organism, all the way up to us needs community. Like it's just, the plant needs that, needs that community just like we need community. So it's that community in the soil that actually gives you that disease, that enables you to work part-time.
So, I like to use the example of an IV drip. And I say, if I'm in a car accident and I'm in a coma and I get life flighted to the hospital and I get put on an IV drip and I can be kept alive for like days, weeks, months at a time. Awesome. I did not evolve to eat through an IV drip. There's billions and billions and trillions of microbes in my gut that actually they evolved animals too, right? The microbes evolved the plants and they evolved the animals. So that microbiome, which is the foundation of my immune system, my health, when it's not being fed, dies off. When you don't have food going into your mouth and out your rear end, which in part is feeding your microbiome, when it shuts down, you become susceptible to a lot of things. Mm-hmm. So fertilizer is like that IV drip. It's soluble nutrients injected directly into the bloodstream of the plant, which can cause that plant to grow. It's true, but it actually does it in a way that causes it to be much weaker. And so it's great business for the people selling the insecticides and the fungicides to start off by selling fertilizer, because that creates a dynamic where the plant is then, susceptible in the first place.
Yep.
And that's not how nature evolved things to grow. For hundreds of millions of years, plants have been growing without the use of fertilizer. Indigenous cultures globally at, continent scale were optimizing ecosystem function with no wheel, with no plow, with no fertilizers, right? I mean, they were working in harmony with nature and actually able to create dynamics where vast amounts of vitality and productivity was occurring. So yeah, we just have this idea that we have to buy these synthetic things year on, year in, year in. And like I said, it's good business for the people selling this stuff.
Yeah.
It's not beneficial to the soil. And foundationally, not only is it bad for the farmer, it creates a dynamic where the food is less nutritious. And you do that for long enough and your kids are going to be sick. And that's where the rubber hits the road, is with your children. And when your children aren't doing well, like, I'm not sure, I'm a father, like people who are parents know what it's like to have children and care about them. And we're 3-4 generations into this epigenetic decline based on nutritional caliber of food decreasing. It's a real issue.
It is
which can be easily solved.
And which is that's what I'm really hoping to kind of suss out from all this is how easy it is. But just like you can't really turn on the TV without hearing about pre and probiotics, and if your gut microbiome is healthy, then you're healthy and your immune system goes up, and that's how you fight disease, et cetera, et cetera. The same works for a plant. And our friend John Kemp did a great pyramid, another piece that I refer to often, just talking about how as your soil is healthier and your plant is healthier by photosynthesizing more, it becomes more disease resistant. If it's creating proper, amino acids, it becomes resistant to sucking insects, and lipids, it becomes resistant to fungus and everything. So the soil is actually your plant's microbiome, just like our gut microbiome, and it needs to be fed the pre and probiotics, just like we do to be healthy and to be disease resistant.
And that's, so the basic point there is that, what causes the plant to be susceptible to insects and disease is exactly what makes it less nutritious for us. And when I tell people, like, if you got a larval form of an insect or a fungal pathogen eating your plant, that's nature telling you it's not fit for animals to eat. We have different digestive tracts than those organisms do.
Yep.
So these are not problems per se. They're nature's report card. They're nature telling us these carrots are not fit for humans. They're more appropriate for bacteria to eat, which is not something the farmers want to hear. But when you understand it, it's a big aha.
Well, it's not something a gardener wants to hear either. And we are kind of wired to choose an enemy. So we see an insect on our plants, or we see, a fungus on our plants, and we deem it the enemy and don't think that, like you said, it's a report card. It's basically nature saying this plant's not happy. We say there's something attacking my plant, but in reality, and what I teach people, in the courses, is all about, if that is happening, then you need to look at your environment. You need to look at your soil. You need to look at your airflow. Why isn't your plant thriving? Because if it was, this wouldn't be happening. I give an example of a garden center, and there is a hibiscus planted right there on the side of the parking lot. And every single summer, that hibiscus, the perennial hibiscus, gets skeletonized. It's just, in no time, it's just blooms and just veins of leaves. But yet in one of the display gardens in the back, That hibiscus barely gets nibbled. Same property, only about, say, 250 yards apart. But that in the display garden, which has a lot more plants growing in it, which has a lot more love, which isn't right there on the side of the parking lot with exhaust and salt and, and everything else, you can really just see the difference. The insects are all on that property and they're not that far away. So it really comes down to, is that plant happy? And it's an insect's job to eliminate, just like it's a cheetah's job, on the savanna, to eliminate the sick and the weak. An insect's job, it's the same kind of thing. It's eliminating, the sick and the weak, getting them out of there so the others can thrive. And that's something that every time I put that out there, people are just like, wait, what? And that's something that, I really put together, from listening to you, from listening to John, and it's just kind of it all started to make sense that these aren't my enemies, that this is a signal.
We're in this, nature and life is the reality we're living in, and it's constantly communicating with us, and, it doesn't matter what we think is true. Because life is the truth, and at that very point applies to us and our bodies and our family as well, right? You can have a cold going around, and some people get it and some people don't. Mm-hmm. It's not just random. There's this all these things, how our bodies function and don't function and break down and heal. The opportunity for a much higher level of vitality and vigor in us, in our lives, is at our fingertips, if we can take responsibility for creating it. And that's the opportunity, is the potential for us to live much more fulfilled, vibrant, vigorous lives is there. But the foundations of what we build our body out of must be strong.
Yep. And we're all just we're doing it through supplements. We're trying to find other avenues when really it's just comes down to, we evolved with food. It comes down to food. I'd like to have you shine a light on another point that I believe is true, but I'm just going to run it by you. I have heard that the improper farming practices, and I will say also just land care practices, are a larger contributor to excess CO2 in the air than just fossil fuels alone. And I'm just wondering if, because when I heard that, I was like, wow, is that true? And can you kind of elaborate on that? Because again, we like to choose an enemy. So we chose fossil fuels and kind of ignored slash and burn. We kind of ignored all the tilling. So can you go into just explaining how that might be possible if it is true?
Yeah, well, if you look at what humans have done with agriculture, we've effectively burned off the topsoil. So, when the pioneers first came into the Midwest and there was 40 feet of deep, rich black earth in Illinois, that blackness is carbon. It's organic matter. It's carbon that came from the atmosphere into the soil. And it came in the last 10,000 years, right, since the last ice age, because of bison running back and forth and peeing and pooping and, carbon sequestering down through photosynthesis into the soil, and actually 40 feet of topsoil, right? That's not an inch a century. That's a lot more than that.
Yeah.
But when you till, and then you expose that, organic matter to sunlight, it begins to oxidize. When you apply fertilizer, what that fertilizer does really is it just breaks down all that organic matter. And so, there's big parts of the Midwest now that have like a 0.5% organic matter. We've completely burned out that reserve of carbon that is like what makes dirt soil everywhere. The Green Revolution, in India, they were able to maintain organic matter for thousands of years in their soils until the 1960s or 70s when they started adding fertilizer, and now it's gone. So, yeah, my understanding is that way more carbon has been added to the atmosphere through the burning of soil, through tillage and fertilizer, than has been added through the burning of hydrocarbons, 100%. And if it was fixed in the soil through plants growing well, it's been burned out through bad agricultural practices, but it can be brought back in through good agricultural practices. So the opportunity here is to sequester massive quantities of carbon back into the soil through good agriculture, which, by the way, means we don't need fertilizers and insecticides, which, by the way, means that the food is more nutritious, which, by the way, means that we are then therefore more healthy. So, like, it's all beautifully connected. It's bad business for agribusiness. It's bad business for pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah,
but
certainly
it's
no
good for our
big people
children
are making
and
money
for-
doing that.
What's that?
Nobody's really making money doing that. If you have nothing, if you don't have fertilizers to sell, if you can't keep, people sick or whatever, it's not good business. However, we could, I believe, by tweaking our landscape practices and by tweaking our agricultural practices, I believe we have the opportunity to affect climate change on a global scale. I might be wrong. That may be too dramatic or such a bold statement, but I do believe it.
5 years, 10 years, we can totally reverse climate change if we were to, as a human society globally, begin to engage the land respectfully and holistically. There's absolutely no question about the fact that we could systemically reverse it. The data is there. There's tons of scientists, multiple continents, multiple countries, all kinds of papers. Yeah.
And again, that's mind blowing. You just said 5-10 years. We've been kicking out these carbon goals, again and again and again, further and further and further. When, all we really have to do is flip the switch, but nobody wants to flip the switch.
Well, my thought is that like suffering causes change, and at some point the suffering becomes high enough that people begin to behave differently. Mm-hmm. I don't think that people make decisions based on like long-term things like climate. I think people make decisions based on short-term things like I'm sick or my child is sick and like I'm in pain. I need to change that now. Mm-hmm. So my thought is if we can give people the ability to like in your smartphone, flash a light at this bag of carrots, 20 out of 100, that bag of carrots, 40, that one over there, 80. If it was that easy for you to literally go and spend the money that you would normally spend anyways on food, on the best food on the shelf, like choose the best, leave the worst. I think is a vector by which we could actually completely systemically shift the way things are done.
I totally agree because I'm a huge fan of voting with my dollars. Let me just ask you one more question, and that is how is or does elevated carbon levels in the atmosphere, how does that mess with plant profiles? How does that change the phytochemicals in the plants and everything? And can these regenerative practices kind of buffer what climate change, if there are any changes? So like we have this excess CO2 in the plants. Is it changing the mineral uptake? Is it changing the phytochemicals? And will regenerative practices help kind of buffer that? Or is that just totally something that I made up in my head?
Yeah, some physicist wrote a paper about carbon. I'm not sure when it was, like 8 years ago in the atmosphere, and that causing there to be lower nutrient levels in plants. But it wasn't based on like a science proving it out. It was like he had a concept. So, my understanding is that in previous times, like in the Jurassic period, when the dinosaurs were around, when ferns were, 60 feet tall and dinosaurs were, 100 feet long, we had like 3,000 ppm of CO2 in the atmosphere or 4,000 ppm of CO2. And now we're at like 420. So if you look back into the historical record, there have been much higher levels of carbon in the atmosphere than we have now. And systems were functioning fairly well. So animals were able to get big, so I don't think there's necessarily a direct connection there between CO2 being high in the atmosphere and plants having low levels of nutrients in them. I think that storyline is flawed.
And that's excellent. That's exactly why you're here. Now I want to ask you the question because you referred to checking out carrots and boop, 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 boop. So can you tell us what the boop, boop is all about? And let us know what it is you've been working on for 8 years or so?
Yeah.
And where, like, because this is just absolutely fascinating, and it very well could change how we do things. So can you just let us know what the boop boop is and go from there?
The science is called spectroscopy. It's what the Hubble Space Telescope and the James Webb Telescope does when they read what stars are made up of 10 million light years away. Like if you ask an astrophysicist, what is a star made up of way, way, way away? Like 10 million light years away. That's a long distance. Like nobody's sent anything out there and taken a sample and brought it back and, put it into a lab. Spectroscopy is a science which basically takes a flash of light and through it can read what something's made up of. Because, copper vibrates at a certain frequency and zinc vibrates at a certain frequency. And if you look in the right spectrum of light, you can see that's copper, that's zinc, that's polyphenols, that's phosphorus, it's protein. So, what we basically have done, this is our first generation, well, it's our second generation little handheld, meter. We calibrated this so we could get readings on, I think, 10 different crops, carrots and zucchini and mustard greens and stuff like that, wheat and oats. So you literally put the carrot on here and it flashes a light and the reading comes out on your phone. It's like, okay, polyphenol level was 85th percentile. We published this in Nature Science Communications. I think, like a handheld flash of light meter, like Star Trek, like tricorder.
Yep.
You can flash a light at the carrot and through a science called spectroscopy, read the nutrient levels in the carrot and have it spit out on your phone. So that's phase one, is like, yes, this is a totally doable thing, which you maybe never would have thought about, but is a fact.
Yeah.
This thing right here is like, some people I know in France built this thing. Like this is a Chinese children's toy. It's called the Magic Pencil. Sure, you can read it upside down. Magic Pencil. They 3D printed a case for it, and now you can go and like if the plant is growing, you just stick a leaf in there and you flash a light, and it'll read it and it'll tell you what's in the leaf, what's not in the leaf. Like this science is called spectroscopy.
Yep.
This is out there. It's a thing. It's real.
And what it means is I could go to the grocery store and say I want to buy a half a dozen apples. I could just go through that whole thing and pick out the best 6 in the bunch and just leave everything else behind. I don't have to squeeze it. I don't have to smell it. I can just point a light at it, and it's going to say, that one's awesome, that one's not. And that's the one I'm bringing, the other ones I'm bringing home.
That's the idea. And so to do that, we have to actually define what awesome and not awesome are.
Yes.
So what is the actual science which says this is the best possible carrot, the worst possible carrot? And that's what we're doing. That's what our organization's doing.
And you've been working on it for quite some time. But I mean, again, like this is where, and this is, I think, the driver behind this. If you give people the choice to pick the best food, then you are going to force agriculture to grow better food, because otherwise their stuff's going to just get left behind. And you will force, whether it be big ag and you're in a grocery store, or whether it just be stalls at a farmer's market, if one is doing regenerative ag and selling out like crazy, and the other one's standing there with a full booth at the end of the day, they're going to want to probably consider changing their practices, because now everybody knows, like, that you can now look behind the curtain and see what's going on, and that's just like. Poof.
That's the idea. I mean, whether you believe in capitalism or not, like whether you think that's the best form of economic structure of culture, doesn't really matter. Like that's the structure we're in. So, is there a way to use capitalism to accomplish the betterment for all? And that's what we've tried to put together, is a strategy that can use the current economic structure to incentivize systemic benefit
and to improve people and their health.
Yeah,
just awesome. But just the whole thought and the whole potential of that, and just with everything that you've said, it's been under our noses the whole time. You just needed to, like you said, in astrophysics, it's what's called, lateral thinking. You took basically the idea and the science from one area of science and just brought it over to a different area, and applied it. And the options, the potential is limitless.
It's massive.
It is. It's totally massive. And the other interesting piece about this and everything you do and you and I do, we both believe in for the commons. Yeah. So all of the information out here, you're gathering, basically citizen scientists, you're gathering all of this information, but it is open for all to see. Like you didn't invest in this to create some proprietary thing to be the richest man on the planet. You did this for the betterment of human health.
Yeah, I run an educational nonprofit, and everything we're doing is open source. It's in the commons. The only money that we have is charitable donations. Everything we're doing is in the commons. We're trying to create a framework that can change the world. And we assume people will make lots of money once we built this framework, and that's just the way the world works. So great, so be it.
Yep.
But there has to be a trusted framework that's honorable, that has integrity, that people can have, they can trust.
Yes.
And so that's what we're doing. We're using the structure of a nonprofit to try to create that foundational, nucleating structure around which hopefully massive global transformation can occur.
And that's the only way it's going to happen, really. It's not going to happen with a little proprietary secret. It's going to happen with sharing the information. That's why you educate, it's essentially why we're doing this as well. It's doing this to put it out there.
Facebook's got their algorithm, and Google's got their algorithm, and Palantir's got their algorithm. You can get a lot of change to happen with a proprietary algorithm, but it's not necessarily change for the betterment of all. And I think that's the point, is like, how do we develop something that can be, supporting collaborative improvement?
Yep. So the spectrometer is not available just yet, but what is available? Can you show us what you have that people can make happen right now that is available for them to get an idea, within the week or so, of how to make this happen? Could you just let us know, what that's about?
So there's this really simple thing called a refractometer. It's been around for, I think, 195 years. If you go on eBay or whatever, you can probably find one for $15. It measures the bend of light when it passes through a fluid. So what we're doing at the BFA is we're branding this refractometer. We got a little what's called a Brixit kit, and Brix is just the scale you measure refractometers in.
Which people relate to wine.
What's that?
People relate that to wine. Like when you hear about bricks, you're usually thinking about wine, but it actually has to do with a lot more than just wine.
A lot of people use, mechanics use it to measure battery acid. And,
okay.
Brix is used by many, many different industries. And the refractometer it's just like a really powerful, simple tool. What we're doing is we're basically creating this little, here's your garlic press, and here's your refractometers in here. And we've got a little chart. Here's the Brix chart, which tells you, poor, average, good, excellent on a bunch of different crops. Mm-hmm. Oops, that's going the wrong way.
There you go.
So we're just finishing this app right now. And the idea is bring home your shopping, take your refractometer, get readings off of it, upload that information into the app. Like, I bought this carrot on this day from this store, and this was the brand, and this is the number. And if we can get people to begin to just test what they buy every day, mm-hmm. and upload that into the commons, then we can begin to see, actually, Trader Joe's and Walmart and Whole Foods have similar things. Or, boy, it looks like Bunny Love is almost always better than Both House Farms. Yep. Or, wow, who knew that the Big Y store brand apples are always good, mm-hmm. or whatever it is.
Yeah,
we can use these simple tools that already exist to begin to do that citizen science process of awareness raising. And Yeah.
Well, it's
step
a
by
very
step.
similar practice to what many people in the landscape community and my circle are doing with iNaturalist, and Bumblebee Watch. They're using their phones, taking pictures so that we know what pollinators are where.
Yeah.
We can start getting an idea, and all that information goes to iNaturalist, and we can have an idea. If you're looking for a rare plant, say, you can find where in Massachusetts, these rare plants have been found because they've been shot on iNaturalist. This is the same kind of thing where you're going to be just taking all of this information and going back to what you were saying before, defining what is good. And then the spectrometer comes into play and really just hits it home. I think it's awesome. Now, when will the Brixit kit become available?
Before the end of the year, I'm not sure when. I just had a meeting with our app developers, and they refused to give me a date.
Okay. Well, we're gonna hope for the best, but people can give a watch, and this just leads me to, the final piece, Dan. Where can people find you? Where can people find the Brixit kit when it comes out? Like, where can, if they have follow-up questions or they want to become a part of the movement, how do they find you, Dan?
Well, the organization is called the Bionutrient Food Association, and the website is bionutrient.org. The research stuff we have on the bionutrientinstitute.org website. So everything to do with the science and the measurements and the papers and publications and all that kind of stuff is bionutrientinstitute.org. We've got social channels, we've got tons of stuff on YouTube, courses, and all of our conferences, speakers for all the years we've had conferences, and we post on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and stuff like that. So either look up my name or look up Bionutrient, and pretty much any channel of the dominant ones were there.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. I mean, you can definitely watch the courses and the talks on YouTube, especially if you really want to nerd out with this. Dan, we could go on for multiple episodes with this, but I just want to thank you so much for this just brief, enlightenment. I think, the information that was dropped, the seeds that were planted are going to open people's eyes, and people might not be looking at things, the way they always have, or they might be inspired to find more information for themselves. So I just want to thank you so much. I'm glad we finally pinned you down before you go on a world tour. So, I'm glad we were able to make that happen, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
Great to chat with you again, and yes, thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much. That does it for Peace, Love, and Pollinators, and we will be back soon. So thank you, and take care. Bye.